And welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about a modality that's been around quite some time, but unfortunately, not a lot of people know about it. It's therapeutic, can make you feel better physically and emotionally. And today we're gonna talk about the focus on the brain and how it ties into Bowen work. And that's what she does. We're going to learn more. Andrea Jones back on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks. And it's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, thank you for being here. And I have to say, even before we get started, your passion is Bowen work. But as I've learned in these last few podcasts, that you run deep when it comes to physiology, the mental aspect, not just connected to the Bowen work, but just in general. So I thank you for that. I find it fascinating. And before we begin, why don't we do a quickie reset
Yeah.
on what is this Bowen thing?
Wow. Bowenwork is a very gentle, soft tissue therapy from Australia, and it's designed to reset and help the nervous system. And that works with everything else. So it doesn't directly address the muscles or the bones. It's not chiropractic, it's not massage therapy in that way. It really does hone in on the frequencies of the nervous system.
Hmm. Why would I want it?
If you have any symptoms whatsoever in your body related to the nervous system, then you probably would benefit from Bowenwork. Bowenwork is great for people who are newly born to passing on. The whole spectrum of this life's experience can be helped with Bowenwork. So it's really fascinating stuff.
Before we dig into the connection with the brain,
Yeah.
do you feel that many of us don't truly realize what's going on with our nervous system? So those two words, learned them in middle school, just briefly, but as life goes on in my journey, the more and more I learn about it, it's kind of everything
It's
in our
everything.
lives, isn't it?
It really is. It's everything. Your nervous system, it has a lot to do with your electrical, chemical, and your polarity, like your magnet. You are a magnet as well as electrical being, as well as a chemical being. Like you are all of these things together, and there's a lot of interesting things with the myelin, which is the covering of the nervous system. And that myelination or that covering allows it to pass those signals with competency. It's kind of like cables in your audio network. If you have frayed cables, the outside of them is frayed, the inside, the signal can get a little bit wonky. So, as a sound designer and engineer, I know it's interesting what the plugs are even made out of, the substance of silver or gold or things that they conduct electricity better. They have a tendency to improve the signal through your audio equipment, and the latency is better, all of that, all of that. So, what your nervous system does, it's kind of like the cables of your audio system. It's the same thing. And what Tom Bowen did was he figured out a way to work the nerves and improve their tone, and he would be able to kind of regrow them even. There's this fabulous story. Let me tell you a story. So Tom Bowen was working with this 19-year-old named Betty LeMarquand, and she suffered from cerebral palsy. And he visited her home every week for 16 years, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the part that he was working on. And he said, I only work the nerves and build a new way of communicating. There was a big day in her life when he worked for 2 hours on her neck with 15-minute waits every now and then. And he was easing the cerebrospinal fluid around the nerves. He said, I just put all Betty's communications together. When he was opening up a new line of communication, it could be a 4-hour session. And she was able to improve enough that she was able to sit up. She was able to take her own weight on her own feet. And she had these chronic spasms in her left leg that stopped. and they greatly reduced, and her night cramps were eliminated through the work of Tom Bowen. So that's just one story. And he really did take into account her nutrition as well, because you need good fuel to rebuild your neurons. Your nerve cells need premium fuel. And in her case, it was beets, because of the nitric oxide they produce. So it was a lot of beets in her daily diet, and not served with vinegar. So not pickled beets. And if she needed it to taste better, her mom was allowed to put some sugar on it to make it taste better, but she needed beets in her diet to get those antioxidants and all of those things that she needed for her nervous system, it's a really fascinating story. So not only was the work important, but also what she ate was important. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So much to identify here. I'm going to work my way back before we work up to the top, the brain. You said vinegar, but I always hear that apple cider vinegar, put 2 spoons of it in my tea this morning, is actually good for you health-wise.
That's an interesting
Yes or no?
concept. Okay, so this is where I'm going to get into trouble. But Tom Bowen did not appreciate vinegar because of the acid alkaline ratio. So you've
Okay.
got fresh citrus, which already has the buffering components in it to make it alkaline in your body. So it's got calcium citrate available in the citrus that will take out the acidity of the fruit. So a lime, a lemon, and things like that are alkalizing to the body. When they sit over time, they become alcohol, and then they become vinegar. And this is an interesting concept in timing. Okay, you want fresh living water to make you alkaline, but when it turns into alcohol, we know that that causes cancer. And so how can, logically speaking, a substance become better as it goes from alcohol to the vinegar stage, and not even more acidic towards the decomposing action of, of the liquid, which is now considered an antibiotic or a preservative that they put into condiments so that they can sit on the shelf for months and years at a time and still have you pull that bottle down off there and be able to eat the stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's all about the timing, it sounds like. And certainly, on the alcohol thing, yeah, I mean, they wanted to put labels saying it causes cancer. Not being negative here. I'm just stating. I'm stating from our government fact there. Working my way back, audio engineer, you're speaking my language. Totally got what you're saying. And it really does make a difference in the components. And now we're going to tie this into our bodies.
Right.
Of transfer of information. Right. Side note, yesterday I had a little extra time. I changed out some cables, now not just audio, but in terms of Ethernet, on this feed that we're looking at right now, because I was noticing delay. There was issues. This is hardwired. This is not Wi-Fi. Right. Intermittent issues with internet.
Yep.
Change the cable, working fine. Something must be wrong with that cable. Maybe it oxidized or bad connect, whatever it is, but it's not being used anymore. So now we equate that to our bodies, our brain, and sending those signals to our brain. How do we introduce the brain with Bowen?
Okay. So these gentle moves, they do work on a muscle. So I move the muscle out of its groove, and then it bloops out from underneath of my fingers, and that causes a response in the nerves that innervate the muscle and the fascia that's around the muscle, so the coverings, right? So that signal goes up to the brain, it goes back to the muscle again, it starts resetting the tension there in that muscle, and it frees up energy to go to where the body requires it to go through those radio-like frequency hormones that the thyroid has. So chemical signals, radio-like frequency signals are traveling through that, what you'd call a cable, right? Your body is a bunch of cables that are wired together. The vagus nerve is it's a bundle of nerves. It's not just one single nerve. It's like and it goes everywhere and wanders through. So it's really interesting how your cable can get all knotted up when it's hit really hard with a lot of force and you become concussed, right? So I've got a story about the concussion protocol, because there's a concussion protocol in Bowenwork that Craig Mattimoe did in California. He was working on a sports team, and 34 of the players were concussed over that course of 10 years, and all of them resolved, but 2 needed longer than 72 hours to resolve because they had been concussed for a longer period of time. So it took them 2 weeks to reincorporate their nervous system, and most of them recovered within a 24-hour period, which is really actually impressive because our Western medicine doesn't know what to do for a concussion victim. Like, sports is really well known for that impact, and 100% guaranteed you're going to get injured if you go into sports, especially football. And the pattern of dementia, early onset dementia, is so much more increased when you have a concussion. So what Bowenwork does miraculously is it resets your nerve tone after you have had that impact. And with the 80-20 recommendations of living water, you're actually able to better capacitate the brain to release any of the broken cells, and then repair the cells that have been left behind that are injured but are not dead yet. And so you don't have that cascade of death that happens after a concussion, which is really fascinating too.
Would you say that as we age, the wiring in us degrades? That's what's going on there. That's what's happening.
Yeah, oxidation happens. It happens a lot. And when you have been, I'd say, exposed to certain heavy metals, mercury in general, from light bulbs that break, all kinds of things, like thermometers, whatever it is that you're exposed to mercury, and tuna or whatever, that tends to build up in the brain. And that's what is causing the Parkinson's issues that you have, or the seizure issues that you have. So avoiding exposures to heavy metals is going to help your nerve pathways to respond better. So there's a book called Parkinson, Stop Parkin, Start Livin', that I read earlier on in my Bowenwork practice. It's by a Bowenwork practitioner who is a naturopathic doctor in Australia who had stage 4 Parkinson's. He was in a wheelchair, and he was able to get out of his wheelchair through Bowenwork and the 80-20, and he republished that book in 2020. It's called Rethinking Parkinson's Disease now. And I worked with clients with Parkinson's over the course of 5 years, and from the time I started working with them, giving them weekly and then monthly sessions for Bowenwork, their balance was so much improved that they never fell from the time that I started working with them to the time I moved away 5 years later. So it's really fascinating how your balance and your posture are helped with Bowenwork so that you can remain functional even with Parkinson's. And with the 80-20 concepts that I learned after I moved, I so wanted to integrate this with these Parkinson clients. But it was also rehydrating the body to remove any build-up of metals that can get into the nerve signal and bounce. You know how if you put a wall into something and your nerve signal can bounce back off of that, and it will bounce away, and it will run into other nerve signals. And that's what a seizure protocol is. That's what seizure is when you've got some kind of a plug in the line, and then you've got nerve cells that the signals are bouncing against it, and they're bouncing against themselves, and that causes the shakes and the tremors, even if it's not familial tremor, if if it's essential tremor or familial tremor. It doesn't matter what the tremor is. It's the nervous system that has a block in it. And what Tom Bowen's work does is it works the nerves so that the signal can either go around a block, or the 80/20 is to take out the walls or take out the heavy metal deposits in the brain so that you don't have that backing up against itself. The same concept is true with Tourette syndrome, OCD, all of those things where you can't move forward unless you like turn the knob a certain way, or things like that, or you wash your hands completely several times a day because that's the way you function, right? So there's all kinds of these things happening in people that are their toxin buildups, and Bowenwork kind of works around that, and it helps you to relieve that.
Wow. And is it with seizures and issues like that? Am I describing this right? A signal is sent. There's a block.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of glass. You throw glass against a wall, it shatters, it goes into pieces.
Yeah.
Now the signal is going into pieces because it hit a wall.
Yeah.
And now it's being picked up by other receptors nearby, but they're not the right ones. So that's where things all kind of get haywire.
Yeah.
Is that what's going on there?
Yeah. That's exactly what's
Wow.
going on. Yeah. Right. And all kinds of neurological conditions have to do with buildups of the metals in certain areas of the brain that have to do with certain logical things, right? So if you've got Tourette's, you've got a heavy metal buildup in the the language center of your brain, and your nervous system is trying to work around it, and it'll shoot out words from your language center of your brain, trying to get around a block of a buildup of mitochondrial inhibitors that are in the brain. And there are so many mitochondrial inhibitors that are in our environment now that were not in our environment when Tom Bowen was around. Okay, so he died in 1982. And since 1982 to now, that there are so many more that we have to deal with, that it becomes even more important to use his 80/20 with his protocols than it ever has when he was alive. Like when he was alive, you could use his protocols and get pretty much instant recovery for people. But he also did tell them, like, what you eat is really important to how you fuel your body from here going forward. If you want to maintain health, you're going to fuel it correctly. So it's really fascinating. Let me talk about
was on
seizure.
the forefront.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that early 80s, he was gone past that, but he was setting the stage for all of the research that came after that, it seems like, where we really took a look at these things, even to the seizures, all of that kind of stuff. Fascinating. He really had his hands on things before anybody even knew what was going on.
He did. He was an absolute genius. And here's the big problem that just broke his heart. It was the government wanted to grandfather him into the osteopathic laws there in Australia, and he really couldn't explain what he did. He basically said, just give me the person, bring me the person, I'll make them better. That is the limit of his communication to this government board. He couldn't systematize it. And so you kind of need a spreadsheet that would cover a million different conditions, and then what Bowenwork protocols, parts of Bowenwork are good for that, and then advanced stuff that Bowenwork has, and then like what herbs and what supplements and what foods are good for each one of those, and have it all stuffed into your brain in order to do the thing that Tom Bowen could do innately. He just knew how to do that. So trying to follow his lead was it was not an easy thing. There were several men who just observed what he did. And if they had the gift, basically, he said, okay, you've got it. You go forth, do the thing, right? And they took from him a different way of thinking about it from their different disciplines that they had before. So Ozzy Wrench had massage therapy, and then there were several others. One of them had traditional Chinese medicine as a therapy, so he knew the meridians, and so he took it from that acupressure way. And then, I mean, there's a chiropractor, and they came at this elephant from all different angles, and they said, this means this, and you can bring it to this and that, and it's an amazing thing. What he did was just he had everything, and then it got busted into parts. So what I do is I try to bring back all of those observers and go, okay, we can meet in them. We can find out what happened with the clients themselves. They get their feedback in there, and then what happened for them and what all of these observers are bringing to the work can help us to do Tom's work in the best possible way. So I want it all to come together.
Andrea, do you feel that it would have been different if he was back at that time? Now we're talking essentially 70s and 60s to 70s.
Yeah.
If he was in the United States versus Australia, do you think it would have made a difference?
That's an interesting question. Because there is somebody that's concurrent doing the kind of work Tom Bowen was doing in Australia here in America, and his name was Lawrence Jones, and he was doing a work, what was he doing? Orthobionomy. Okay, so
I've heard that. I've actually heard that term.
Yeah, orthobionomy was here in America when Tom Bowen's work was in Australia, and they are just as popular as one another, which means not very popular. So it's just not, less is more is the basic concept. The less you do on the body, the more profound the work actually is. And that's why it's because the body has to have time to incorporate the signals, and it's got to not be pushed. Nobody likes being hard sold to. Nobody likes the salesman coming to their door and pushing them into buying something. That's not an American, we don't like that. Nobody likes that. Your body doesn't like that, right? It doesn't like to get cracked and shoved and pushed and prodded. It can learn from soft inputs that maybe it's its own idea to get better, right? Maybe it's in its best interest to put better fuel in the tank. Maybe it's like my own idea that I want to overcome this concussion or this seizure protocol, or, I can build a new pathway around this blockage. It's a fascinating thing what we can overcome as a human body on this planet. And what Bowenwork does is it tries to convince you underneath the radar of your self-defense mechanisms that your body has its own capacity to heal. It's really fascinating like that, right? So I would be an orthobionomist if I wasn't a Bowenwork practitioner.
Interestingly, orthobionomy, I've heard of that for quite some time. Bowen, first time we met, that's when I heard about it. Mm-hmm. But the body is fascinating. If you give it everything it needs, keep it in balance,
right?
It can heal itself. It can do so much for you, but we derail it. And sometimes not even intentionally. Look at our food supply. It's tainted. It's pesticides. There's garbage in it. Yep. I read something just this morning that more than half of our calories come from not just processed, but ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
It's not even real food.
Right.
Then we wonder why we have so many health issues. Andrea, how do we find out more? How do we connect with you?
You can go to my website at bowenus.com. I'm an instructor for the American Bowen Academy, so you can go to americanbowen.academy and sign up for a class. I've got online classes, we've got in-person classes, and I teach this so anybody can learn it.
Would a final question? Would somebody need to have some kind of training before taking this class?
There are introduction to Bowenwork classes that are just 4 hours, and
Okay.
you learn 15 moves for yourself and for your family that you can do right away. So they're easy ways to get in and learn it.
And that answers it, because I was wondering whether you could do it on yourself based on the learning.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can do it for others. Amazing. Andrea, thank you so much. It's getting clearer and clearer as you explain it, and very well. But this one's a little deep.
Yeah.
But certainly the electrical connection you brought up before, like the, no pun intended, or maybe light bulb went off in my head.
Right.
I really appreciate it. Thank you again for being here today. Super cool.
Thank you.